Hi there everybody, I'm Tonks.
And I'm Coley.
Welcome to our very first Pastors Chat with Coley and Tonks. We've been thinking about ways that we can share a little bit more with you, particularly as we're in self-isolation and social distancing. We're spending a lot of time at home. Josh and I both love reading. So today we're going to share with you our top 3 books that we would recommend to you to read at this time. So Josh, you want to kick us off? What's your first book?
Why not? I'm going to use a paper copy first, and this is one by Stanley, who is one of my favourite pastors, and he's got a lot of great books. But this one's called Enemies of a Heart. It's one of his lesser known books, and it's been republished not that long ago, but it is fantastic, and it just talks about a lot of those things that we may not think that we have problems with, but when you read about it, you realise that it really is at the root of a lot of our life. It's a really complimentary book too to Didn't See It Coming, which we've recently talked about at church. So it talks about breaking free from the destructive power of guilt, anger, greed and jealousy. And it's quite a powerful book, and he talks about where that comes up in the Bible, and he talks about how we deal with that in our modern day life. And he's just an author that's just really easy to read. It's almost, if you've listened to him preach, he almost writes very similar, but highly recommend that one, especially if you loved our Didn't See It Coming series.
Fantastic. Well, first book I've got is Liking Jesus by Groeschel. Groeschel has become an absolute favourite author of both Josh and myself. We've probably read maybe 8-9 of his books over the last year or so. This is the most recent one that I've read, and Liking Jesus, it's actually referring to the whole thing of Facebook and getting likes on Facebook. Do we simply like Jesus in that little click, or is there something far deeper that we can go into? Groeschel uses that whole social media aspect of what's going on in life around friends lists and how many likes we get and views and things like that to draw that parallel between what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Very, very contemporary book. Lots of great practical challenges within it. And like all of Craig Groeschel's books, just a joy to read. Very simple to read. You can get through it very quickly, but at the end of it, you realise, gee, you've been hit with a massive, massive challenge. So that's Liking Jesus by Craig Groeschel.
He's a great author to read. So easy to read, Craig Groeschel. And my next 2 are actually Audible books. I was always against Audible and the idea of an audio book. My wife bought it for me for my birthday last year. And I've actually grown to just love it so much, and you're still reading the book, you're just listening to it, but you can go back, and I'll still always be a fan of the paper book. It's just a great way to listen in your car, listen when you go to the gym, any of that. And this is one that I've absolutely loved. It's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And this guy, James Clear, does this book all about habits, and he looks at the science of habits, what it takes to form habits. And I love trying to put good habits in, but it's quite hard to actually form a habit, and he talks about how to do that and little hacks, and I've been using some of them. It's just a fantastic book and really easy to read again.
Awesome. Well, my second book, I'm sticking with the paperback books. This is probably a bit of a generational thing, but this is by another of my favourite preachers who's also a favourite author, Rod Parsley, and this book is called The Cross. Rod Parsley is a preacher who, when he gets onto that gospel message, I've never heard someone preach with such fire and power, and that kind of fire and power is really in this book. It's covering obviously the cross and all that Jesus accomplished for us on the cross. You know, I've been hearing and giving gospel messages for years, but after reading this book, he helped bring out even new things around all that the cross brought to us, all that Christ's sacrifice brought to us in a whole fresh way. And every chapter, every page just seemed to be overflowing with challenge and a new appreciation for all that our Saviour has done for us on the cross. A great thing about some of these preachers, such as Stanley, Rod Parsley, Craig Groeschel, is not only do we get some magnificent books, but often the books are accompanied with sermon series, and this was certainly one. So I was able to get hold of the DVDs, others through their online content and things. So it becomes a great partnership, so we can read a magnificent book, but then also watch a sermon series that's based around that book as well. So this second book here, The Cross by Rod Parsley.
That's great. And I love that books can give you a real in-depth look at the sermon, because we've only really got 20 to 30 minutes when we're preaching, but when you go into the book, you can just see all the research and all the depth that can come with that. My last one, and this one's another Audible one too. I've actually ordered the physical copy of this book because it's so good and I want to go through and highlight a lot of stuff. But it's called The Problem of God by Mark Clark. And I was looking for this book for a mate. We had to give him a gift, and he's always talked to me about God and asked me lots of questions about God. He's not a Christian. And I was looking for a really good apologetic book that wasn't heavy, that was practical, but answered a lot of his questions. So I read this one, and it was just perfect. It's just really practical. It doesn't go too deep. I'd probably say if you're into apologetics, it's a good entry-level apologetics book, but it's just so practical, one that I'd highly recommend reading if you don't believe in God, if you're a bit skeptical about God, but even if you know God and you want to have some really good answers for your friends like that, That Problem of God is just the most practical apologetics book that I've read before.
Awesome. Well, my last book is not a Christian book. This is actually a secular book. I picked this one up at Big W, and it's called That Will Never Work, and it's by Mark Randolph, who was one of the co-founders of Netflix. Now, something we're probably all doing at the moment is binging on Netflix while we're in self-isolation.
Tiger King.
Yeah, but Netflix has become just a worldwide phenomenon. It's one of the biggest tech companies. It's the largest of all the streaming businesses or companies, however you describe that. But this goes right back to the very beginning of how Netflix began. And I find it very interesting that as a secular book, it's touching on those things about, with the title That Will Never Work, being that Mark Randolph and the other co-founders just coming across so many hurdles, so many pitfalls, so many blockages to get their idea of Netflix up and running. Now, they were told time and time and time again, this is impossible, that will never work. And yet we know now that Netflix is a phenomenal multi-million dollar business. One of the interesting things it brings out is people perhaps do know about it, that Netflix actually spoke to Blockbuster. Now, Blockbuster at the time was the largest video DVD rental store in America. Hundreds of stores right across the whole country. Even here in Australia, we had that business. So Netflix actually approached Blockbuster to see about going into partnership. Blockbuster told them that there is absolutely no way that they're going to defeat them and wipe them off the planet. And here we are, years later. There is one Blockbuster store left in the entire world, and Netflix are just going from strength to strength. So it touches on a lot of that great challenging stuff. So I'd say not a Christian book, but contains so much stuff about how do we approach the impossible, how do we overcome hurdles and major blockages to our vision, and as we as Christians think about that, what God is going to be able to do through all of that as well. So That Will Never Work by Mark Randolph.
It's fantastic.
So where are your books available from, Josh?
You can get all of these online, so you can get Andy Stanley's through Koorong. We'll put links in the details below on this video so that you can all buy them. We'll put the direct link to probably wherever we can find the cheapest, but mostly Koorong, I'd say, except for that Netflix one.
Big W.
Yeah. If you like the Audible idea, that Audible, if you send me an email, if you contact the church, what we can do is you can get your first book for free from Audible. So I can send you an invite, and you might get The Problem of God, you might get Atomic Habits if you're interested in those, and you get the first one free. And try Audible out, because as I said, I didn't like the idea at first, but live by it now. So that is another way that you can contact us.
Brilliant. Well, I hope this has encouraged you about ways that you can spend your self-isolation, whether you're during the day, of an evening, on the weekends. Get a great book, feed your heart, feed your soul, and use these times of isolation productively and proactively. So I hope you've enjoyed our little time together, our pastor chat with Coley and Tonks, and we'll be back next week with another topic. And if you've got ideas for topics, things you'd like us to talk about, let us know. So God bless you.
Fantastic. That's a good one there.